All right, I want to welcome our guest to the show. It is Daniel from the UK. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thanks.
I'm glad to have you, man. I'm glad that we could reschedule this. I know you were under the weather the last time we had this scheduled, so I appreciate you working with us on the schedule and coming back on the show. I have been excited to talk to you about your research, man.
So have I, mate. So have I. And I'm very glad to be here.
Awesome. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about Bigfoot. You're a young investigator, you're a young researcher, you're only 14 years old. So, what got you interested in Bigfoot as a subject to begin with?
So I was sat watching Expedition Bigfoot with my granddad and my cousin, and we were just like watching normal TV. And it was when I was just sat there going, "Is this real?" So I turned to Gramps and said, "Gramps, is this real?" And he went, "Yeah, it is." I'm like, shocking. I'm like, and from there we were completely off on one. Then we were completely off on just big Bigfoot and everything. But Bigfoot, all I've done for the last 5 weeks is Bigfoot.
Well, let's talk a little bit about his answer. Did he go into detail with you about why his answer was yes? Because that's honestly an interesting answer. Most people in that situation, in your granddad's situation, would tell their grandson, no, it's entertaining. There's a lot of cool shows about it, but I'm not so sure it's real. Do you know why he answered yes immediately? Has he had experiences or was it something that he was interested in?
In some way, me and Gramps are very similar, I'll say. And I would say I gotta say, it was about 2 years ago now. So I was around about 13, and I was old enough to know that it was something that was being investigated, and I'm autistic, so I take things very adult way, and I went, "Wow, that's just incredible." My cousin went, "That's not real," and I'll speak about him later, but it was then as a new beginning of watching everything, and it's like we met for kind of 3-4 weeks, I think, just watching the program, and we're like, when it ended, we went, "Oh, when's season 4 gonna be on?" And we were chatting about where it is, where it might be, and I think he was just very open about it. He didn't really have an opinion, and obviously we were working from.
Gotcha. So you're watching Expedition Bigfoot. What is your favorite part about that show? I know it captivates audiences around the world. People have their different things that they enjoy about it. I've got to hang out with those guys, Ronnie, Maria, and those guys. Russell Accord is awesome. So I can see the draw from the personalities there because they're just huge personalities. They're really cool people. But what is it about the show that really captured you? Was it their scientific approach to it? Was it the way they got out into the woods? Was it things that they were doing in the woods that really captivated your attention? What really got you into Expedition Bigfoot when you were watching?
So I think it was the mystery behind the show, and I know a lot of people discredit Expedition Bigfoot and a lot of the shows, and I get why. It's because a lot of people think, why are you capturing this on camera? And some of it is for the entertainment. My personal opinion about it is that they do it so well, it's hard to discredit it. I'm like, it's such a good show where, and I like Maria's side to it, where she is really on the scientific side, but I also like Russell's way of, I'm going by myself, investigating a lot more. And Ronnie's just an amazing person where he questions everything. And I think they're a great team together with them, Bryce handling it all. I think it's just a brilliant way to do a show, really. I think it's really, really clever.
Yeah, I agree with you. I honestly, I told you before we started recording, I don't really watch the show, but like I said, I met Maria, Ronnie, and Russell a couple of times at different conferences and things like that. And I tell you what really sent me over the edge of being more apt to believe what was going on the show was hanging out with Zach Hall, which is the cameraman that's always with Russell that records. And Zach was very open about the experiences and how real what they do actually is. Getting to know Zach and hanging out with he and Russell a couple of different times have really pushed me towards the fact that I think they're doing this for the right reasons. Everybody has their opinions about the show. Some people have said that it's fake. I was hanging out with Todd Standing a couple of weeks ago up in Radium, and Todd was really bashing Expedition Bigfoot, Finding Bigfoot, and talking about how fake the shows are. But again, everybody's got their opinions about it. I get that. But if you're getting something out of it as a young researcher, I think that's really what the show's all about. It's obviously for entertainment. It's television, so they have to make things entertaining for the people who watch it. But for you as a young researcher, you're going out into the woods. So let's talk about that. A shift from Expedition Bigfoot to a little bit to talk about Expedition Daniel, right? Because you got out into the woods and started looking into this for yourself. Talk about what that journey looked like. How did you first get out into the woods, and what kind of area were you going into, and what were you finding?
This is where I switch back to my cousin. After an episode of Expedition Bigfoot, I turned to my cousin William and said, I want to go out in the forest. I want to go and do what they do. Now, we were quite smart about this, and we went, we're going to gain the experience first. Our local animal, which is deer. So we decided, Expedition Deer. Let's go out. Let's look for deer. Let's research them, look for footprints, blah, blah, blah. And so we did that for 6-7 different episodes. And that took up about a year and a half. And it was an incredible journey. We found deer that were barking in front of us, and we found different footprints. We got plaster of Paris. We were experimented with trail cameras, all sorts. And it was just incredible. And when we returned from Expedition Deer, I went, there's only so many times you can go out and do the same thing. Now, although we do have a good bit of land down here, see, I'm right off of the Quantock Hills, which are a massive area of forest, which is just incredible. Now, I said to my nan, who's my partner in crime, is we can't stop. But I did say, let's switch completely. Let's now go to the Exmoor Beast, which is a big cat we have. Now, we were going, right, there is a very low chance that we're going to find this cat. So I said, let's go and find where this cat may be living, maybe eating. And so I picked a forest near a stream that we have running through where we live. Now, this forest is 15 minutes from where I'm sat right now. And we went to the forest with the intention of just open mind. We didn't even have Bigfoot in our heads. Now, this is where it just gets ridiculous. Is we're walking up this trail, and we got to the trail that goes down a ridge, and you got two trees with a gap in the middle. And my dad goes, "Sis." Now, I wished I hadn't turned around, but when I did, it was an 18-inch footprint. Now, that's just mad. Now, I knew about Bigfoot. I was quite knowledgeable about Bigfoot. And I didn't think I would come across a footprint. Now, when I looked at it, we got a ruler out and went, yeah, that's 18 inches. I'm like, what's walking around bare feet has an 18-inch foot? No one. We make a cast of it, and I decided to take eDNA. Now, did you want me to go into that?
Yeah, we might as well. Let's just go right into the eDNA. I definitely want to talk about that.
I took the eDNA, went, right, I'm going to find someone that is going to test this for me, and we're going to get result. Now, I didn't have any intention of getting any result. Now, it took I sent off to a company called SGS, and it took about 6 weeks. Now, during that 6 weeks, we found bones, we found tree structures, we found scat, we found more indentations. So I sent off about 5 samples, and it got to the last week. I'm like, you can't do any more in this forest. Now, it's about 3-mile forest, so it's not big at all. And there's a part of the forest where you physically can't get into. It is tree, brambles, nettles, ferns, and you can't get in. Now, what's in there, I dread to think. But when I got the eDNA results back, I just froze. I honestly just froze. Now, obviously, we had our typical pheasant, we had chicken, deer, wild boar, human DNA, which I assume came from us, and squirrels, rabbits, badgers, your normal woodland animals. And when I looked down, you have old world monkeys and great apes. Now, I'm like, I wasn't expecting that at all. Now, I'll also say we had another hit. Now, I don't know if this is related, but it is a dog walking area. It's not heavily populated with dogs, though. Now, on one hit, you had wolf and dog, and on another one, you had wolf and domestic dog. Now, I'm like, okay, that's a bit weird. Why is wolf DNA in prints? I don't know. Now, dogs could have just stepped in it, but this was off a track. I'm like, okay, it's just something I'm going to have to look into. But the main thing was the old world monkeys and great deer.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I looked at one of the articles that you had posted on Facebook, and I read some of the preliminary results of the DNA, and I saw that, and immediately my eyes lit up and I started getting chills, honestly, because I was fascinated with the fact that there was old world monkeys, as you said, and great apes that shouldn't be there in that area. So talk a little bit about that. Did they give you any kind of an indication of how that might have been, or was it just, here's your results, Daniel, now run with it and let your imagination run wild? What did you do? Did you start digging into those types of DNA that you guys that they came back with? And if so, what were you finding and what was going through your mind when you were doing the research?
When the result came through, I was trying my very best to debunk as fast as I possibly could. And I couldn't. I honestly couldn't. Now, this is very highly unlikely that someone from a zoo, and the nearest zoo is an hour away, is to come down wearing the same boots that they wore in the zoo, which seems very unlikely, and to take their shoe off and put it in the mud. I'm like, if it was, it would have to be a bit of a loony for you to do that. That's just so. I could almost say I can rule out that. I can say it wasn't human. Now, some people have said, and I can say this, sometimes human has a great ape DNA, so it can come off as that, but we don't have old world monkey DNA. That's just mad. Now, it's more than one hit. Now, we had other indentations that we collected it from that came back as old world monkey. It's more than just one hit. Now, we have been to that forest, I can't even count how many times. But the scary thing is it's only 15 minutes from where I'm sat. Now, I'm like, as I said, we went out to a forest today where I had tracked where this thing had gone. Now, I don't know if this thing is still here. I don't know if this thing has moved on. I do know that there has been some sort of sighting in Wales very recently. Now, But I do know what we found today is we found a very large footprint, the same size as the one we found 5 minutes down the road. And when I was taking eDNA from it, out popped a very long orangey. Now, that is brand new, fresh investigations that now I'm doing. This can't get any bigger. Honestly, it can't get any bigger because the piles and piles of stuff that we're finding. Now, in my mind, it seems ridiculous that we're finding something every day. I'm like, this isn't us making up in our mind. It's really not. I have an event which I'll talk about later with Richard Freeman, one of the biggest cryptozoologists here in the UK. And I showed him the picture of the footprint and he went, holy crap, I don't know. All the scientists, I've spoken to Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, I've spoken to Amy Boo, I've spoken to the big ones, and they've gone, don't know. Not even the big scientists know what is going on. And that just blows my mind, honestly. And with then the eDNA, it struck to me today when I went, if we can replicate these results in a forest 5 minutes down the road, that would be huge. If we could replicate primate DNA, I would be able to fully say this thing has been moving very briefly through the area. Now, we saw a lot of downed trees. We saw loads of tree structures, but made by humans as well. So there could have been structures there, but I couldn't tell. Now, we're up there for 2 hours, and within 2 hours, we found a footprint and gained eDNA, gained a hair. Now, that's an ongoing investigation that I'm trying to get my head around, but to then have eDNA in the past, I'm like, no one in the UK has done this before. So I'm like, why is this thing here, and how long has it been here? And we haven't known. Now, not once have I said that this is Bigfoot. Not once that I've said that it's anything. I've said that it's weird. This doesn't belong here. And I think it's very strange, I'll say that.
It's definitely strange for sure. So talk a little bit about, I would love to see any photographs that you have. I know people listening to this are going to want to see the photos of the footprints that you're talking about, but do your best, if you would, for me and the audience to describe the type of foot. Are we talking a very humanoid type foot? Obviously, it's big if it's 18 plus inches, but talk a little bit about the foot. How wide is it? How does it look as far as to the naked eye when you guys are coming across these tracks?
So I would possibly say, it was the track that we already have the DNA for, that was found probably about 8 weeks ago, was probably had sides, and then probably about 5 distinct toes with then kind of indentations in it. Now, a lot of people can't see the footprint, and I gotta admit, it's hard to see. But when I look at it closer, I go, no, that is something. And I keep going back to going, come on, this time, it can't be aphid. And I honestly can't. Now, people are going, oh, it's nothing, it's just leaves. I'm like, no. Now, that's where the eDNA came from, which is why I know is something. And it was just a very big, I would just say, if a tree stump was there, it just looked like something just been pressed right down into the ground. That's what it looked like. And then the one we found today, we couldn't cast it because it was right on the surface. But what it could do is it had rained quite a lot last night, so I could really pick away the mud, and I could really bring those that eDNA up. Now, the weird thing about it is that the hairs weren't on the top; they were ingrained into the bottom thing in the footprint which kind of indicates this thing would have had some weight on it. It would have had some weight to push this in. Now, it could have been a deer, because deer have quite underbelly, long hair, the brownish. Now, I'm colourblind, so I'm not 100% sure on the colour side of it, but I know that when Nan was stood next to me, she went, I have no idea what that is. Now I go, okay, so my best job now is to now try and get a hold of a microscope now to try and see if I can see anything in the hair there.
Yeah, I'm definitely thinking the same thing. I would love to have somebody that has some training there, maybe even a veterinarian that could probably look at it and identify maybe what type of hair it is, or at least tell you what it's not. I'm definitely interested in that for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the tree breaks and the tree structures. That's something that has come up. I found those here on my property. I'm in North Carolina here in America.
Wow.
We were finding those everywhere I went, in Radium up in Canada on my recent expedition up there. Obviously, tree breaks are very subjective, like most of the things that we're talking about here. It's very difficult to say without actually seeing whatever pulled the tree down and broke it, to say that it was anything to do with Sasquatch. And I'm very much like you. I've never said that. But it's interesting because I've tried to replicate these, at least the ones that I found in Canada and here on the property, and I can get close, but it's just not the same as the tree breaks we were finding. Particularly, I'll talk about the Radium expedition. So talk a little bit about what are you guys finding very similar things as far as tree breaks? And you talk about structures. Talk about some of the structures that you guys are finding. Are they TP-like structures? Go into a little detail about what they look like when you're coming across these structures for me.
So, obviously, today we couldn't decipher anything because it was just in there, just complete loads of trees down. Now, obviously, scouts or something would have been in there, but in the other forests, there were distinct ones. Now, I have a story that kind of honestly frightens me, as in not emotionally, just what is that? Now, it's a very big ridge, and we have to use a rope to get that. And this was a 15 feet tree structure with kind of 2 branches going that way and 2 branches holding in the middle. You would have had to use these to hold these branches in. Now, it was very weird. And a few days before we found that, and I was with my cousin at that point when we found, I smelt something that was just horrendous. Gives me the indication of, hold on, was something there when I was there. Now, when I found this structure with my cousin, Nan was all the way up on the top of the ridge because she was with the stuff, because it's still a public forest. Now, when we got down, it was, you're on like a track that led into just fields. And it was probably 500 meters of just ridge and then into the fields. So we were just having a look at the tree structure, and I ran up to get Nat. Now, my cousin William was taking photos with our very good camera, and I didn't think anything of it there. And I returned home with the amazing tree structure. And I was actually on another podcast, and I posted it on Facebook to say what my thoughts. And someone said, "Is that Bigfoot?" I'm like, I go on it, and to my surprise, in the background was just a black head, 2 ears. And I go, and I say to the guys I'm on the podcast with, I need to stop a sec. What is that I have just found? And I look at it and go, William took that. He was alone when he took that. I'm like, that's scary. That a boy that is 10 was down there alone with possibly that. Now, it could have been a shadow. It could have been the way the sun was because it was setting. But I go, No, we can't ignore that. Me and Nan go back a few days later, and Nan cannot place it until she does. And what we realised we were looking at eye level was 20 feet up a tree.
That is definitely crazy. I have not seen that photograph, so I would definitely like to see that. Let's talk a little bit about the equipment that you guys are taking out. You mentioned your camera. What other kind of equipment are you guys taking out there on your expeditions? That's what I always find fascinating. Some people are into thermals, some people are into audio stuff. I'm more of an audio kind of guy because I work with audio, obviously, on the podcast every day. But what are you guys taking out there besides your camera? What are you using as far as equipment to capture? Maybe are you guys putting out trail cams and stuff like that? Talk about the equipment that you're using.
So because of the limited money that we do have now, although we do have money, we don't have enough to buy good equipment. Now, from the national press, I got paid £100 and I went, we are buying proper equipment now. To start off with, Dad actually had a professional camera and a video camera and a tripod. I'm like, mine now. So we started with that, and I got like my bag and like some cheap stuff like torch, and for my birthday I got a tent. Now, we don't like camping at all, but it's good for a base camp during the summer when we're in the forest and we're there for a day. It's good just to sit down, and we got camping chairs. And then when I got the cash, I went, right, we're getting some proper eDNA stuff. So we have now test tubes, tweezers, proper latex gloves, like small bags to put the test tubes in. We've got labels now, and I bought 2 trail cameras with my own money, and it's a good amount of equipment. It's a good amount that we can go out and use it. We bought a professional rope, and just it's the basics you kind of need, really. And so we have a lot of cameras, and then obviously the eDNA stuff. We now have a bucket for plaster of Paris. We were offered some free bags of plaster of Paris, which I'm like, yay! So we have 3 free bags from there. We have the basic, amazing equipment that you can have. I'm hoping for Christmas to have a thermal drone. Now, that is probably one of the most amazing pieces of equipment you could ever have. Now, I want to put that drone over the forest where we found all the prints to see if there's anything there. And then, obviously, then a thermal camera. I've got someone coming down next Friday with a thermal camera. But the basics we have, which is incredible.
Sounds like it. I'm very excited for you guys, and I want to talk a little bit about the latest stuff that you just found, the hair, the other eDNA samples that you just took. Are you sending those back to the same lab and they're going to do more testing? Are you holding on to the hair to see if maybe you can do a little preliminary stuff on your own? What's the plan for that evidence that you just collected?
Obviously, it's completely brand new, so I'm currently sitting on it for a minute. I have sent an email. Now, obviously, they did the eDNA free for us, which is absolutely incredible. Now, whether they'll do that again, I don't know. I have sent an email to say, look, one more time, we have some incredible evidence, because all I would need is another one to go, if it comes back the same, we've got jackpot then. This isn't a mistake. They did offer to actually send us some eDNA kits, so we might actually do it ourselves, which would be amazing. Hair-wise, I have quite a lot of hair samples I still need to test. Luckily, my mum is the Senko at a local school, so I'm hoping to say, could you borrow a microscope for me? So I'm hoping to get a microscope to see if we can get the hairs under there. planning to get the hairs under there. Once I run there and I think it's something, then send off the DNA. If I don't think it's anything, I might not. I don't know yet. To answer that, yes, but I'm just going to try and sit on it for as long as I can. Now, I'm not one for waiting. I'll do it immediately, but there's a few things you've got to think about first. Is there a chance that we're going to find something bigger? And if there is, then we want to wait. Or is this big enough to send it? It's a big question you've got to ask yourself is, am I feeling this is something? Or am I not? Is this worth it or not?
It's a big question that most adults can't really answer for themselves. So I am in awe of your thought process when it comes to this stuff, because it is exciting when you find something, obviously, but to do it in the right way, because you're thinking globally, right? You're thinking outside the box, because this could be a huge discovery. In my opinion, I think you've already discovered something pretty impressive just with the first eDNA, right? Not very many eDNA samples come back anywhere with old world monkeys and great apes not supposed to be there. So that in of itself is huge. And now to have the hair samples and the other eDNA, just to have that thought process at your age, and I don't mean that to be demeaning, obviously. I know when I was
it's kind actually helps actually that a lot more people are more understanding. Now, some people are like, no, he's 14, he can't. But a lot of people are like, he's 14, he wouldn't make this up. No 14ers asked to ever do this before. So yeah, let's help him. So actually, yeah, it's actually a perk, actually.
It's great. And I think it was because of your age that Amy Boo reached out to me and said, hey, you should get this guy on your show. He's doing great work. And I love Amy. She's a good friend of mine. So obviously I reached out and said,
friend of mine,
yeah, let's get him on and talk about this stuff. So there's a whole lot going on here for a lot of people. Again, that there's a lot of adult researchers out there don't approach this thing the way that you're doing it. So I commend you and kudos for that. Let's talk a little bit about obviously you've gotten some press out of this. You've gotten some international press and you've been on the radar here. A few people know who I am, so I can understand a little bit about that when you put yourself out there and there's people who know you and those kind of things. I say that to say, how are you handling the notoriety? How have you been processing that? Because that in and of itself is a whole nother layer to what you're doing. Obviously, you just want to be in the woods doing your research, but you're doing things like talking to me on this podcast, and tens of thousands of people are going to hear you on here. And you've been doing these press things and they've been writing articles about you. How have you been handling that as far as the pressure that comes with that? Is it just something you're taking in stride, or has that been difficult for you?
So as I really struggle with school, honestly, I could not stress enough how I'm not even in school at the moment. I'm doing online lessons, and obviously I'm in year 10, so I'm very close to my GCSEs. So I'm only doing English, maths and science, and this is a different universe for me. Now, I actually contacted the news myself, and then Dad got involved and helped. So we've been on national press here, and I don't know about the US, but I do know that I'm finding different people picking up the story every day. I'm finding new people that have picked up the story so many times. I know Ronnie shared on his page loads of times. To answer that, all right, yeah, there's been a few issues that we've had, but it's gonna happen. And obviously, I've got a very big Bigfoot event coming up next weekend, and we've got to be careful on who attends, because now I'm on national news and I am young. It can bring in people that we don't want. Me, myself on the news, I think it's incredible. I laugh every time I find me on the news, especially when I found one day that I was on a picture with me Patty from the Patterson Gimlin film, that's just incredible. That's just amazing. But yes, I'd say it's good.
That's a good thing. And Danny and I went back and forth with your dad. Craig, he was great in helping. He didn't really do a whole lot. He just said Daniel was perfectly capable of setting up his own interviews. So let's go at it. So we immediately shifted gears and started dealing with you. But your dad's been great. So how has your mom and dad handled that? Your nan and your grandfather, how have they handled you getting into Bigfoot? Is that something that they're interested in? Are they very supportive of your efforts? How is that going on in the family dynamic?
So if I start with my nan, Jill, she is on top with me the whole time. Now she's 72, I think, or 73. And she comes out in the forest every time with me. She's very on board. Now, she did not believe in Bigfoot at all a year back. Now, I hadn't believed in it, but I did know about it for 2 years. But when she got really interested was when we were finishing Expedition Deer, and we started this new expedition and the podcast, and she really got interested. Gramps is in and out. He doesn't really like being on in front of people. He has some traits of autism from me, I swear to God. But he's very into it still and likes it. Dad doesn't really believe in the subject, but he is very on top with me, very on with me, and very into everything, into the eDNA and all stuff like that. And Mum is the same as well. She's interested in what it could be. She doesn't really know much about Bigfoot, which kind of makes it hard for her, but she's still very much on top of it, yeah.
That's awesome. You've mentioned it. Let's talk a little bit about the podcast. Let's shift gears and talk about that. How did that come about? What can people expect when they check out the podcast? And let's go into that. And then I want to talk a little bit about some of the people that you've interviewed.
Absolutely. So it's called Mythical Legends Podcast. Now, I started it to gain more info about Bigfoot. So just before we went out to the forest, I started the podcast. Now, I've spoken to some incredible people, and it's one where I've just started to gain experience about it. And because I am young, there's a lot in my head, and one thing I will bring up is the Bigfoot event that I'm doing as well. That I've brought a lot into it, and I'm probably I am the youngest cryptozoologist here in the UK. I don't know about the world, but I'm the youngest here in the UK, which makes my name even bigger. And it's amazing, and that's why people love it on the podcast. Now, people that I've interviewed, I started with Amy Boo, and she is incredible. I chat to her every other day. She's got advice for me, and she's just incredible, absolutely incredible. I've spoken to Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum twice, and my Gramps was on for that one and probably talked more than I did, because that's his idol, absolute idol, and he spoke more than I did, and probably more than Meldrum did. And we did 2 parts with him, and that was amazing. We've done one with Doug Hychek. I'm actually planning to do another one with him soon. Kathy Strain, and all sorts of just amazing researchers in the US and here in the UK.
That is awesome. Those are some of my favorite people in the world that you've gotten to sit down and chat. You got Ron Moorhead on the show. Ron lives here in North Carolina now. I hung out with him earlier in the year at an event. He's definitely a character. So let's talk about your event. We've mentioned it a couple of times. Let's get into the event. What can people expect? How can they attend? Is it going to be an online thing and in person? Talk about your event, how that came about, and what people can expect when they attend.
Again, it's something my family don't let me get bored, because when I get bored, I come up with new ideas. And I phone my nan immediately and go, "We're doing this." And she's like, "Oh, God." And so I tend to keep myself very busy. we started with a children's event in Purple Spoon's cafe here in Somerset. And we were meant to have one Bigfoot researcher come, and it was a low-key thing. And it turned out to be a success, absolute success. And I met a guy named Chris Alsford. He's another Bigfoot researcher here in the UK. And when I left that event, I went, right, now let's move on. And my dad went, maybe we should do a few bigger guests. And he said, so let's leave it for a bit. I went, okay. 2 days later, I'm like, no, I'm doing it now. I can't wait any longer. So I was contacting Amy and that, and we went, it is too difficult to get people over here at the moment. So we've decided to go over there next year at some point for a conference, which I can't wait for. And so I then started going, UK. Who's here in the UK? I have now ended up with 10 different guests. We have, I don't know if you've heard of the CFZ. They're a cryptozoology company, and I've got the owner of that to come to my event. I've got Richard Freeman, who I mentioned, who's attending the event. I've got loads of people that are attending the event. And it's here in Somerset, Burnham Hybrid, Purple Spoons Cafe. And we've managed to get a hall that's for free. Yes. And it's next Saturday. We are also doing an online meeting with Amy and Mike Ann. I don't know if you've heard of Mike. He's a best friend of Amy's as well. And we're having them on to do an online talk at 1:45. We're also having an online talk with a also young researcher here. He's 16 and he's doing a talk at our event as well. All our guests are doing talks, and we've got 3 people doing book signings at our event, which is amazing. I've literally just had a message now saying we've got people coming with Bigfoot dioramas that they've created. I'm like, brilliant. All right then. And I am planning to do an online stream. I haven't confirmed that yet. And I now hear that Bridgwater Mayor and Burnham Mayor may be attending our event now. I'm like, oh my God. So it's gone from being little to now a big Bigfoot convention where and we've still kept the children's stuff. We still have loads of children's activities, fact tables. The cast will actually be there, and it should be a very good event. Very busy week for me though.
It definitely sounds like it. Daniel, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule and come on here. I will link in the show notes for everybody who wants to check out all of your stuff. Obviously, we'll link to the event so people can attend that if they want to virtually. If you get that set up, we'll certainly link to that as well. But Daniel, I really appreciate you coming on, man. I've had a blast talking to you.
You are very, very welcome, mate.